So, what's going on?
What's up, Brandon? How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Alex?
Not too bad. Obviously, you can see my background is a little different, but welcome back to Living Electric.
Yes.
It's still Alex and Brandon, just in different locations. So I'm traveling for work right now, but that doesn't mean the podcast stops. So I'm coming to you from a hotel in Bakersfield, California. And we thought today would be a good opportunity to discuss Tesla opening up their charging network. We saw some news come out of, I think I just read the electric article, but it's obviously kind of public knowledge at this point. They've opened up kind of their first CCS / Tesla site. So That's really exciting.
Yeah. That was something that honestly took me by surprise because I monitor, I've been watching that for months now, how they were
Right.
going to do things. And there was that rumors about the magic dock and how that would work with the adapter and so forth. And then all of a sudden I just see on my Twitter feed, magic dock found, for our own New York Supercharger.
Yeah.
And we always thought that me and the Chargeway team, we always thought that they weren't retrofitting old stations because that station went live in October. So it's relatively new.
Okay.
But that's confirmed that they are retrofitting older Superchargers.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how that's going to play out.
I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense strategically, though, right? I mean, if you have a simple enough retrofit that you can just go to a site, swap out a few parts, and make it, ready to charge other vehicles, I think that makes a ton of sense versus trying to build a site from the ground up with a completely different, magic dock and all that stuff. Because it's really, if you look at some of the pictures, the difference is not that much. It's the same supercharger stall, it's the same look, it's literally just got this extra piece on it. So I'm curious what's involved in that retrofit, though, because when I was doing my when I was going through the process of retrofitting adapter support onto my car, it was kind of a process to do all that. So I'm wondering if there's additional parts they have to replace inside the stall versus just adding that little magic dock piece.
Yeah, I'm not, honestly, I think it's a perfect location for where they've installed this because it's right by their the Supercharger factory in New York. So
is that right?
I think they're calling it Gigafactory New York, which is actually the first time I've ever heard of that. I just thought it was, the where they have the solar panel manufacturing.
Yeah.
But that's in Buffalo. This is in Syracuse, I believe.
Okay.
But from what I've seen in the photos, it actually looked like they did take off the sides of the Supercharger. So maybe they do have to replace certain things in order.
Yeah.
I'm sure as the week progresses, we're going to have people go out and test it and stuff. But it's not live in Tesla data yet.
It doesn't show as a special Supercharger or anything like that.
Not yet. Yeah, we're
is it in the
other.
I didn't even look. Is it in the Tesla app?
No, it's not. That was the first thing I checked. Yeah. Yeah, because it's so similar to the level 2s that they're starting to install that you now have to pay it in the non-Tesla or charger non-Tesla section of the Tesla app. It's not showing yet, which was the first place I thought they would show it, but it appears based on Reddit they're still testing it.
Okay,
but
so they're probably having some test vehicles come try it out. Do some testing before they open it up for sure.
Which is smart.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. That boggles my mind, the amount of things that just get rolled out and released without proper testing.
Right.
It's just very frustrating as an engineer. What do you mean you didn't have 30 people sign off on this and double check your math and do all this?
I know. Yeah, that just blows my mind. I feel like that could be any level of any product. If there's no testing involved,
Right.
there's been so many software updates that I've had for my phone and for my MacBook, and it just it's nobody tested this.
Right.
But yeah, I'm curious to see how that's going to play out because that kind of leads into the main topic of our episode today.
Yeah, which is what is this, good or bad? Is this what are kind of our thoughts on it? The other thing I was going to mention is somebody pointed out on Twitter actually is the NEVI requirements. So National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure requirements call out a credit card reader. So they call out CCS, they call out at least 4 plugs, and they call out 150 kilowatts, and they call out a payment method that generally means a credit card reader of some sort. So it has to accept credit card, which, I'm curious if that's something that they're then going to try to also implement, because like, how easy would it be for them to, drop a kiosk at their site that says, scan your phone here, choose your charging stall, and you're charging. Like,
yeah,
because it could get expensive, obviously, to put it on every single stall, but some NEVI requirements do allow, depends on the state, obviously, allow you to use a kiosk system. So you're not installing 4 credit card readers or 8 credit card readers for Tesla. It's just one for the site. And then it's like, paying for parking downtown. You park your car, you go to the kiosk, and then you like tell them what spot you're in sometimes. But makes it a little bit cleaner. So I'm curious if that's kind of part of their long-term plan as well, is to start adding those credit card readers in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's actually, you brought up a really good point. Like, like I was looking at the photos of like the Magic Dock today, and it's at every single stall, which actually was, it surprised me, because I thought that
just one.
Yeah, or like, like maybe
or
like
half
4
or something.
Yeah, like, splitting it in half, because that's what I'm noticing with like those level 2 installs. They're doing, like 50-50. Like half the green or J1772 and then half red or, the Tesla connector.
Right.
At this point, I'm not even going to start saying NACS, because it's like, I kind of feel like that was kind of like a show if they were really just going to be implementing these magic docks, but that's just my 2 cents. But, I was looking at, I forget which company it is, but they specifically have a kiosk where it's just like a standalone touchscreen. There's a credit card reader. You select which charger you want, like exactly what you mentioned.
Yeah.
You swipe your card and then you go plug in.
Is this Tesla or somebody else, did you say?
It was a different company. I can't remember off. It was a smaller company. But I can't remember off the top of my head exactly which company it was. But,
right. I know some other companies are developing that too, because it's like it's got to integrate with, obviously we have kiosks for a lot of other kind of simpler stuff, but for integrating with a charging station and actually activating a session, like there's some more integration that has to take place. But yeah, that's an interesting point about putting it on every stall. I think that's a good thing. I think the more flexibility they can give people is better. And like, I kind of hate the Magic Dock term. Like, that almost feels like an Apple term. Like, but if you look at the design, like, it is very smart. Like, just for the people listening or maybe that haven't seen the article, basically, if you pull up in a Tesla vehicle, it acts like a normal supercharger was. You just pull the connector off the hook. You plug it into your car and you're charging. If you're activating it with a CCS car, when you activate it, the CCS adapter essentially locks to the Tesla cable, and then when you pull it off, the whole thing comes off. It's the adapter and the Tesla plug, and then you plug that into the CCS car. So as elegant of a solution, I think, as they could create based on kind of the parameters here. But I think it's a good solution, and definitely, like, I'm curious to see how this looks at future sites and just kind of what the utilization is as well. I think that's the other thing I think is concerning a lot of Tesla owners, right? Is are we going to be like, are Rivian's going to start clogging up superchargers?
Well, I can't wait to see the Bolts plug into superchargers.
Right.
Like, that was the first thing when I first saw the news article. I texted my friend Andrew, because normally he's on top of, he's going to laugh when he hears this, because normally he sends me EV news.
Right.
And finally I found something ahead of him, and I was like, oh, I'm ahead of you this time. But the very first comment I said was, I can't wait for Bolts to start clogging up superchargers. Yeah, I mean, it's fair, like, if it's a publicly accessible charging station, charge at it, like, even if your vehicle can't charge, I get it, it's probably annoying to like other drivers, like, totally understand that, but I really think that this is going to push EV adoption further. I'm just curious to know how like the rest of this rollout is going to be handled, because as you mentioned, I'm sure there's requirements in terms of hardware switch outs and so forth, so like I highly doubt they're going to retrofit every supercharger that exists. And on top of it, with NEVI funding, they're not required to do that for already existing stations. They would have to do it for anything that's funded by NEVI. That was my understanding. So if they
Yeah.
were to retrofit the older stations, that would come directly out of their, their funding, their
Exactly.
private funding. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, technically public funding since they're a public company.
Yeah, that's
but
true. Yeah,
they're shareholder money.
Yeah, I forgot about that SEC case. That just
Yeah. Yeah, but you're exactly right. That is a great point because the NEVI requirements are a new build site. It's not retrofitting or just updating an existing site. So yeah, and maybe that's why they are starting with an existing site and retrofitting it to be like, hey, this is already built. Like worst case scenario, we can just rip these off, and it was a good test or whatever. We can go from there. But I'm also curious. Like I'm in California right now, and like a lot of people have been talking about like clogged superchargers. There's not enough stations to support everything. And I think, unfortunately, we get stuck in the Ohio bubble where it's like we don't see a lot of full charging stations, right? It's very rare. It's obviously gotten more common as Teslas have become more popular. I think I've seen full supercharger stations a lot more often. But I still think it's still got a ways to go in the Midwest and Ohio specifically. But in places like California, it's almost going to either push other networks to be like, oh crap, we got to figure this out, or else they're just going to start using the Tesla network, or or we got to pick it up and do our thing a lot better. So
yeah, I am curious about how this might impact Tesla reliability, because I know in Europe they had that issue when they first opened up the supercharger to some vehicles, based on like software interchange. Like it did cause a lot of like initial issues during the first rollout.
Really? Where like cars weren't connecting, or like it was just not interoperating with cars correctly?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So like that's where like I'm curious to see, like I'm sure that's why they're testing it on different vehicles. Like in that image they were testing out on Rivian,
Right.
So yeah, I just really hope that kind of gets like worked out, because I don't want like any like superchargers breaking or like their uptime like decreasing because of like software issues or
right. Yeah, you got to be careful with that. That's an interesting point too, because like interoperability is like something you don't really think about too much, because you're like, what do you mean it's got a CCS plug now? What could be the problem? But it's like there are so many like little nuances with vehicles where it's like they might do a slightly different protocol or like timing things right or something like that, where it could cause issues on a supercharger when Tesla has control over all the vehicles, right? So if there's an issue, they can push a software update tomorrow to all of them and fix that issue. Whereas like for Rivian's having an issue, it's calling Rivian or saying, hey, like these aren't working on our stations right now and it's not our problem. So fix it.
Right.
But,
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how this rolls out. I mean, I am excited to see Tesla opening their supercharger network to like other vehicles. I think it's going to take the strain off of other networks, especially as they essentially, I'm going to say, catch up. I'm going to put air quotes right now, but a lot of networks are still playing catch up to how large the supercharger network is. So it's getting there. But and the thing is that like I feel like I sound like such like a Tesla fanboy. I'm just going to say that. But it's the truth. They have more ports than the majority of fast charging networks out there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. And I just really hope that this pushes other companies to put more stalls in at locations to help relieve some of that.
So let me ask you this. Do you think Tesla doing this will lead people to fast charge more? Just in general.
I think so. I think so I'm going to say this like hypothetically, say for example, if like Tesla doesn't open up all of their superchargers, obviously that's going to leave gaps in routes for certain cars to make it to certain charging stations. So I think yes and no. I think like if they really did retrofit every supercharger out there, absolutely. I think more people might take more advantage of that. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to answer that.
Do you think they're gonna be strategic about it and be like, oh, like EA doesn't have this route covered, so we're gonna open up supercharging along this route? Because there's clearly more routes open with superchargers than there are with EA or EVgo or some of these other big networks. So do you think they're gonna? I'd imagine they're gonna be pretty strategic about that. Which ones they open?
I would think so. I mean, it would help a lot of vehicles, make it to like certain locations. Right now, South Dakota is kind of like a barren zone. In between like. I'm like drawing a blank on which states are which, but I think
two
that's
of those
Missouri.
States.
Is it Minnesota? Is that Minnesota right there?
I honestly don't know. Thinking about it.
I think it's Minnesota.
Dakota. Yeah, Minnesota's on the west side, and then on the east side is Iowa. No.
Yeah. No, that's south. Anyways, okay, so there's Illinois, Minnesota, and then South Dakota. Anyways, okay, this is not our
my geography is limited to Ohio and the surrounding states. So
right.
if it's west of Illinois, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, we only know California and some of those bigger states. But so like South Dakota, like there's a pretty good blank, like space for like CCS vehicles. Like Ready Charge is like a network that just finally put in a fast charger, but it's a 60 kilowatt fast charger. So it's not like anything like extremely, like high powered or ultra or hyper, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
It's not a Green 7. Like it's lower. And there's a bunch of V2 superchargers along that route, which would be perfect for vehicles to be able to get to like the Badlands or to Yellowstone or like some of those more rural areas where other networks haven't exactly caught up yet. So, I think it just kind of depends. I think it might lead people to like fast charge more, but it also depends on pricing too. We don't know how much Tesla's going to put a premium on it.
Right. I still, it's so interesting being out in California and some of these places where EV adoption is so much higher because, and we mentioned on the Orange episode and some of the other episodes, it's like so many of the EV buyers just treat it like a gas car. Just go to a fast charger when they need to charge and that's it. Like they don't even think about level 2 or level 1 charging. And it's very odd, and I could almost see this kind of not backfiring, but like having an unintended consequence of Tesla opening this up to be like, oh, I just bought a Rivian, like my apartment doesn't have it charging, I'm not even going to attempt to try to get it installed. I'll just go to the Tesla Supercharger and charge my Rivian. So that's kind of more what I was alluding to. Is I almost think it could have that effect where people are like, hey, the Tesla network's reliable. I know it's going to work when I go there. It's going to be faster than, sitting at a public level 2 station, and I can get my vehicle charged, no problem. So I think that may be an unintended consequence of opening up this network personally.
Yeah.
Because we already see that with Tesla vehicles, right? I mean, Tesla doesn't really have a great, they do and they don't have a great, destination charging network. It's mostly superchargers. So most people just, I've got a Tesla car, I'll just go to the supercharger and be done. That's just how I'm going to do it. So
and we saw that in the beginning days as well, when they offered all the free supercharging. Like there's so many Tesla, like owners that would pick up their original Model S and be like, well, I'm not putting home charging in because I have a supercharger down the street from me. I'll just go and sit there for 30 minutes. Like it's free. Yeah. So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting, and I think my biggest concern is that it's gonna clog up charging stations for Tesla vehicles, which is just gonna create more wait times, more lines, and it's gonna. I think a lot of Tesla customers, depending on how this plays out, are gonna get frustrated at first.
Right. Yeah. Almost. This is kind of tangential, but I think that was a good constantly. Word. What's that?
That was a good vocab word.
What's that?
The word you just said, that was a good vocab word.
What did I say? I can't even remember.
You said like everybody's listening as far like, does Brandon have an education? It's
what state?
Right. Which state? You said like a tangent, but tangential. I think that's how you said. Yeah, tangential. Go ahead, keep going.
I said this is a bit tangential.
Yeah, that was a good word.
A lot of syllables in that one.
Can you use it in a sentence?
Anyway, the thing we saw with with a lot of the federal money coming out and grants and stuff is it's all focused on fast charging. And I almost feel like, I mean, truly we've seen it with like a lot of things is like the true way to make EV charging way more accessible and way easier for people is home charging and like reliable charging where they park long term, right? Like that is just so constantly overlooked, and it frustrates me a lot in the industry that the focus is on more expensive, higher power, fast charging when level 2 can get the job done 90% of the cases. I mean, that's all we talked about, 2017 to 2020 is like, oh yeah, like 90% of your charging is done at home. And I'm kind of curious what the numbers are with like new EV owners over the past, 3 years. Like, are 90% of them still charging at home? Because more and more people in apartments are getting EVs, more and more people without, a garage are getting EVs. So I think it's changing very quickly. And we need it. We almost need more like government funding to go towards, upgrading home charging or getting apartments ready for home charging. Like things like that, I think will have a bigger impact than these expensive fast charging projects. Personally.
Yeah, so. No, I absolutely agree, and I know that's part of the NEVI funding for level 2 charging. I can't remember exactly how many ports they mentioned. I think, what was it, 500,000, like 500,000?
Yeah, that's a good point too. I know. In my job, a lot of the focus is on those NEVI corridor funding projects, not as much on the apartment ones. So and I know that's what the states kind of had to have more formal plans for, of like what corridors are you putting stations on. So there's a lot more planning going into that. But I haven't seen a ton come out with the destination or level 2 charging.
Yeah, I haven't seen much of that, and I kind of had a feeling like that would be like the initial phase for the NEVI rollout, like focus on the fast chargers. As you mentioned, so many people just want to know how quickly they can charge versus like how conveniently they can charge. That's actually, we should have a whole episode on convenience versus fast charging. Like, I feel like that would be a good conversation. Right. But, I mean, if you can start off that initial rollout, get the fast chargers in the ground, and then start sprinkling those level 2s in different communities, apartment complexes, and really make it easier for people to plug in overnight. Even level 1 chargers, like Orange Charger, like get that in and make it easier for people to charge. I just think so many people take for granted slow charging, like, or standard charging. I think so many people just take it for granted, like,
that it's just going to happen because it's like so much lower cost, you're saying? And it's like an easier thing to put in.
I like I said, I think so many people focus, well, how fast can I charge? And it's like, well, you don't need a fast charger at your house. Like, you can just plug in when you get home, or, plug in when time of use, or whatever your, case might be. But it's interesting.
You brought up the like free charging as well. It's like, it's very, like we saw with Tesla's now like giving people credits on on vehicles with free supercharging, like extra trade-in credits, because I'm sure they've seen that like if it's a free thing, like people love free, like they're going to use it even if it's a little bit inconvenient. Like if it's, hey, maybe an extra half hour like added to your commute to like pause at a supercharger before you go all the way home for free charging, then like they might do it once a week. Like things like that. I think there's just been a lot of unintended consequences of the way we've kind of set up the initial phase of EV charging for a lot of people.
Well, I do want to just bring up a point with free charging. That's exactly why they ripped out those chargers in Twinsburg, because they left them as free, which, I mean, that's kind of on the city for not putting, like a cost to it. But there are people who were using them every single day for 8 hours at a time to charge up their vehicle because it was free. And they were taking advantage of it. And that's what happens when you leave something as free. Sometimes people will take advantage of it. And, that's why, like, I'm not, like, a massive proponent of free charging. Like, it's good for some people who need it. It's good from time to time. But if you have to pay for something, I'm going to pay for it. Like, I'm not going to shy away from that.
Well, I think it's all about the intention of it, too. Because, like, what was the intention of free supercharging when Tesla first was creating their vehicles? Like, what was the reason for that? It was, to help sell vehicles. It was an incentive to sell vehicles. It was to be like, hey, your charging is paid for. There are chargers everywhere. They charge up in less than a half hour. why wouldn't you buy a Tesla? Like, that's kind of what their business pitch was.
Yeah.
And now it's like, and even with the Twinsburg chargers, it's like, what was the intention of the free charging there? Was it truly to be like a, random people from the community can just like charge here overnight? Or like, what was the intention of setting up free charging there? And I'm not sure if, not to like bash on Twinsburg, but I'm not sure if like a ton of thought was put into it of like, why are these free?
Yeah.
Because it makes sense in some places, it doesn't make so much sense in others. So
yeah, I honestly, when it comes to the free charging, I still can't wrap my head around it. Like why the city set it up like that. Like I think it was a nice benefit for people to like utilize them and like get that data. But like I'm still a firm believer that like they would still be in the ground let me restart how I was going to word that. They would still be in the ground if they would have put a cost to it, because they would have recouped some of that install.
At least covered some costs, so you didn't have people using all your electricity, right? So
yeah,
you definitely got to be careful with that stuff, because there's a right way to do free charging. And we talked about doing like a Nudo specific episode, but like one of the features we have is we have this thing called an access code, where you could get it if you check into a hotel, where it's like, hey, if you have an access code, it's free charging since you're staying at the hotel. But if a random, person comes up, it's not going to be free. They've got to pay the market rate for charging. So somebody doesn't see this just as a free charger and is going to use it because they know it's free. It's like, it's now an inconvenience almost, because they've got to pay for it, and probably more than they would pay at home. So that's then deterring people from blocking that charger. Yeah. But if somebody truly does need that charger, truly needs to charge, then they can pay for it and still use it. So there's a lot of flexibility that comes with our system, and I know some others do similar things. But there's, again, kind of a right way to do free charging, not just open and free for everybody. So
yeah, I really like to hear that there's multiple different options depending on who you are as a driver for how the charging session's going to work.
Right.
That's really nice.
Yeah, it's very handy. We see it really popular with hospitality, with hotels and things like that. But yeah, that's one of my like. I'm glad I'm with Nudo, because we are so like flexible on that stuff. Not a lot of other networks are that flexible. So, and we may even, back to kind of the Tesla discussion, we may even see now with non-Tesla vehicles, they have a different rate for supercharging. That might be more expensive. I mean, Tesla has the freedom to do that, right? So that's another thing we may see as these networks mature, is like certain vehicles get priority.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly would not be surprised if that's how Tesla prices out non-Tesla EVs. They're gonna charge a premium to have them charge at their supercharger, and then like if you're a Tesla driver, you get like a cheap, like an existing rate. It's not they're not gonna upcharge you depending on the location. But yeah, I think it all depends on like how they're planning on controlling traffic in a way with their network.
Yeah, because we're now getting into gas territory almost, where prices are changing daily. Like, and networks kind of have the ability to do that. One thing I was going to ask you about too, if you think Tesla would, or I guess drivers in this case, would drivers pay a little bit more for the convenience or the reliability of the Tesla network? So if they're like, oh, this supercharger is right next to an EA station, they both have CCS, Tesla station is 10 cents more per kilowatt hour, but I know it's going to work when I plug in. Yeah. Like, which... I think I would pay that extra 10 cents if I'm like, I don't have to mess around with this for 10 more minutes to like get EA on the phone and figure it out.
Yeah. No, I'm going to agree with you on that. Like, absolutely. Like, that's the moment you were asking me that question, that's where my head was going. Like, I would absolutely pay for the Tesla experience over, like another experience where like a charger might be down. Am I going to have to call customer service? Like that's where my concern is with like the Magic Dock, and like as they like expand this within the Tesla network, is that going to be the instance? Like, are they going to start running? And I mean, this is all new technology. I'm sure there's going to be issues that come up, but it's I would definitely go for the Tesla experience. Yeah.
What about, do you think Tesla's going to try to implement plug and charge with non-Tesla vehicles?
I I mean, it depends.
Thought about that.
Yeah, I think it depends because the thing is that because like for example, like I don't think Tesla utilizes that engineering standard, right, with their vehicles. They do the what is it, ISO
15118.
Okay,
Tesla's been using it, I think, since the beginning, or at least a version of it. At least that's what I've heard. I think they use something very similar to certify or verify payment on vehicles, link payment to vehicles. Because I mean, right now you set up your payment in your Tesla account. Yeah. When you plug in, it recognizes the vehicle. It's secure as far as I'm aware. I don't think it's reading just the vehicle MAC address or whatever that some other networks use. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I'm pretty sure they use a very similar standard. So
okay, yeah. I mean, with that being said, that would probably work with the Mach-E and some other plug-and charge vehicles like the Taycan, the Lucid, right. And trying to think of other ones, but. Yeah, I mean, I think it would depend. I don't know if they would necessarily do a workaround like how EVgo has their auto charge set up.
Right.
But if they did, I mean, it would make it a lot easier for drivers.
Right.
But the only thing that would be the issue is that if the adapter, in the Magic Dock, is locked, how would the car communicate with the charger?
That's a good point.
I mean,
yeah.
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I mean, I'm sure they could figure it out.
No, I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. Because you would need some kind of mechanism to know if this is a CCS vehicle or a Tesla vehicle. Because
that's what that QR code is for, on the
right,
big sign.
Because you scan that and then go from there.
I don't know. I mean, they might. If they could figure out some type of communication between the car and similar to what they already do with the Tesla and the Supercharger,
some kind of RF thing that just opens the door, but it's a CCS adapter release. Yeah, I don't know. No, I didn't think about that piece, but yeah, I think it would be neat if they started to roll that out, but I think it would also take some agreements between Tesla and other OEMs, and we know how that has gone in the past.
Yeah. I'm not sure how that would work out, but
yeah.
Sorry, I'm starting to fade a little bit.
No, I'm trying to think if I have any other discussion points on this, because I mean, it's again, like a lot of things, we're still in the Wild West here. Even though we're clearly progressing towards a lot of chargers out there, more chargers, Tesla's really kind of hit their stride with supercharging and are now, this is the first time they've done something truly new with superchargers too. So it's very interesting to see how this is going to play out just long term. Is this going to be another thing where it's they pilot it for a year and they're this is not worth it at all? Or is it something they're going to continue with and keep? So I think time will tell, like a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I'm excited for it. I think there's going to be a lot of hurdles that are going to, people are just going to have to get over, Tesla drivers, everything in that aspect. But I mean, if it pushes EV adoption even further, it makes, allow people to be more comfortable with longer road trips and so forth, then it's a win.
Right.
But I think it just all depends on how things play out. But I mean, even Tesla, with the announcement of them, opening up their network, they even said that they were going to double their existing network to accommodate all the EVs that are hitting the road.
Right.
So, and they're seeing it. I mean, even their own vehicles, it's they're selling so many vehicles.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun. Probably extremely frustrating, but it's going to be really cool to see how things play out.
Right.
Yeah. Trying to take a more positive spin.
Right. Like you said, I think it's overall going to be a good thing. I think it's definitely going to, more plugs is always good. More options for drivers, I think, is always good. And with a lot of things, when companies compete, then consumers generally win. So, any kind of competition among networks or among vehicles, it's generally good for the consumer because that means they're working to make a better product. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Capitalism at its best.
That's right. Yep. So, you got anything else?
No. I think I'm good. I'm tired. Normally I say this at the very beginning of the episode, but did not sleep well last night. So I'm going to end the episode on that.
All right.
But actually, no, I do have something because I want to start getting more, audience engagement. I would like to hear, your thoughts on the Magic Dock, especially if you're on Twitter and or Reddit, wherever you're seeing that news. Let us know your thoughts. I definitely want to learn more about that.
Definitely. Yeah, we've been getting some awesome comments on our YouTube channel, so shout out to everybody commenting there and leaving us some feedback. We read everything, even if we don't reply, so we certainly appreciate it. But with that, we'll catch you all in the next episode.